There's a storm coming.
Load up.
I've been waiting for you.
Come with me if you want to live.
Wait, what? What happened to the scared Sarah Connor of my youth?
Don't hurt me.
Now she's a full-blown dragon-toting badass? Yo, what have you done to my precious Terminator timelines, Genisys? The Terminator series has been going amazing since 1984 until about 1993. Then the other movies happened. But the latest movie, Terminator Genisys, isn't exactly a reboot just because they started the entire thing over. They've altered the timelines in a way never done before in this series, and it's still heavily connected to the old movies. This is an example of one of the most complicated timelines in film history, unless you've seen Primer. That movie will make your freaking head explode, man. You'll need a sponge to clean it up, and it gets ugly. I'm Gabe Hohreiter, and if you just want an explanation of what the heck is going on in Terminator, then come with me if you want to have that explanation. I think I messed that up. This is #news. Okay, we gotta move fast because there's a lot to explain and understand here, and to really get it, we gotta go back.
That's lost.
All right, how did we get to this new bizarro Genisys timeline? I'll explain. Terminator, despite what you may think, actually doesn't get too mixed up in alternate timelines. More often than not, the movies are all on the same timeline, with only one real exception that was dealt with mostly off screen, which is why this timeline change is such a big deal. Not only does it change everything in a really confusing way, but it does it in ways that it expects you to follow. Imagine that. Okay, so let's start describing the timeline established in Terminator 1. In 1984, there's a young waitress lady named Sarah Connor. She's gonna have a baby named John in 1985. Kinda unrelated to her, a while later in 1997, Cyberdyne creates Skynet, an evil program/robot hive mind that hacks the world's nukes and has us all nuking each other. Everything gets blown up and there are only a few survivors. Sarah Connor and her son, John Connor, will make it through this. Sarah has trained John to be a great military leader, and way later, in 2029, he's leading the surviving humans and is actually about to successfully defeat Skynet and its robot army. Skynet, knowing it's about to lose everything, uses its ace up its sleeve, a time travel device. It sends one of its machines, a Terminator T-800, the Arnold Terminator we all know and love, back to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor and prevent John Connor from ever being born. That way, the machines would win, since the humans would have no leader. So future John Connor, knowing this is happening, decides to send one of his best soldiers, Kyle Reese, also back to 1984 to protect his mom, Sarah. He doesn't send a whole army because whoever goes has no way of getting back. They're gonna have to live out the rest of the 80s. That poor man. Also, because sending a lone hero lets us have a classic 80s love scene. Oh yeah, look at those hands grabbing each other. So yes, there is some weird stuff going on in this timeline because it turns out when Kyle and Sarah hook up, the resulting baby becomes John Connor, who is the same guy who sent him back in time in the first place, to bang his mom and become his dad. I think it's safe to say John Connor has daddy issues. Now, while you could think that this is the start of an alternate timeline where John Connor now has a new dad from the future, it's actually not, because Terminator time travel is kind of weird that way. It's called a predestination paradox, meaning all the events in this timeline have always happened, like it was fate. So Kyle Reese was always John Connor's dad, and John Connor is a badass warrior in the future only because his mom knew to give him battle training, since she now knows what happens in that future. Now, if you really feel that this logic doesn't make perfect scientific sense, I would counter that with it's Terminator. You just gotta deal with it. So yada yada, the Terminator gets destroyed and so does Kyle Reese, but all of that was taking place in a timeline where those things had actually always happened. So at the end of the movie, nothing has really changed and we're still headed toward the 1997 Judgment Day and the future war with the machines. So, Terminator 2. When that happens, we're actually still on that same timeline from Terminator 1. Sarah Connor is kind of psycho now, which is what happens when you tell people your baby daddy was from the future and your son is our only hope against the machines. So she's locked in a mental hospital. John Connor is an angsty punk tween being raised by foster parents. Now this movie is awesome and has a badass villain, the T-1000, and a great twist where the future human resistance reprograms the T-800 and makes it a good guy. But none of that stuff affects the timeline really, because even though Skynet got desperate and sent back more Terminators than we thought, spoiler alert, the good guys still win, and Skynet's attempts don't change the timeline any. However, the secondary story in Terminator 2 where they decide to prevent Judgment Day by destroying Cyberdyne/Skynet, and this main inventor guy, Miles Dyson, blows himself up and he's like, click, actually does change the timeline. This is the beginning of a brand new timeline where life should be good for everyone, right? Wrong. Terminator 3 picks up on the new timeline. Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor is dead because she got leukemia. It's a very serious type of leukemia where movie producers don't want to work with you anymore. And John Connor is now an angsty adult. T3 is a bit of a ripoff of T2 with a good Terminator and a bad Terminator fighting over John Connor, but the bad guy is now a hot lady Terminator, so I guess it's totally different. Good job. producers. Apparently a different version of Skynet was still being worked on, and this time the US government is behind it. So good luck stopping that one with all the Republicans and Democrats and Congress and...
Do you know anything about politics?
Not a thing. The movie ends with alternate Skynet causing alternate Judgment Day, except now it's 2004. But we're still on the second timeline. Terminator 4. Sorry. It's not actually about time travel at all, so I'd say we could skip it entirely. Except it's worth reminding everyone that this is the movie that caused the new John Connor, Christian Bale, to have his epic freakout.
What the f*** are you doing?
Can we get some f***ing professionals in here, please?
Are you an American?
I'm trying to figure out what exactly I am. So, I hope you've kept up with us so far, because that's just the old movies. Now, the storm, Terminator Genisys. In terms of the timeline, we actually start this movie out in a pretty neutral place. The filmmakers kind of purposely kept it vague as to which timeline we were on, which works since both of the timelines have a future of war with machines. So this Terminator saga that we watched through 1984 past the 1990s is finally caught up on the other end in 2029, when the Terminator and Kyle Reese are first sent back. Except this time, Kyle Reese looks less 80s and more like Die Hard's son. Now here's where everything gets super messy. When Kyle Reese goes back to 1984, we should theoretically be watching the first movie play out, which it actually starts to. But then some major differences occur. First, a T-1000 is waiting for Kyle Reese, even though that never happened in the original 1984. Also, the T-800 that was sent back to kill Sarah started out on the same path, but suddenly he gets his bare ass handed to him by another T-800 who conveniently looks the same age that Arnold Schwarzenegger does in real life. And even weirder things happen. Kyle Reese is supposed to go back in time to save Sarah Connor, but she's not a scared waitress anymore. Instead, she's a full-on badass, and she saves Kyle Reese. Plus, she knows all about Terminators and T-1000s and messed up timelines. So how did all this get so effed up? Well, Skynet sent yet another Terminator back to kill Sarah Connor in 1973, before the first movie even took place. This means the filmmakers have gone back to the timeline of the first two good movies, then went even further back, 11 years before them, and changed the entire timeline way back there. So that is how we got the alternate timeline number 3, where all this weird stuff in Terminator Genisys lives. And here's the biggest deal, because it starts before any of the movies take place. It has effectively erased the Terminator history that we've ever known. All of it. Gone. Now this move might feel a little familiar because Star Trek and X-Men Days of Future Past just pulled the same move of sending an existing character back in time and changing the timeline from the beginning in order to start the whole series over but keep it connected to the originals, and wow, Hollywood will literally change the fabric of time and space to replace old familiar faces with sexy new actors. This new timeline that starts in 1973 has a major plot hole. Sarah survived this assassination attempt because someone sent back a different T-800 to protect her, and that Terminator actually raised her, which is why she's such a badass when the new 1984 comes around. I mean, if you were raised by a jacked up killer robot, you'd probably be a badass too. Or I guess, at least emotionally unavailable. But who sent this good Terminator back to protect Sarah in 1973? The movie actually doesn't tell us. Yeah, I know. That said, I think they're purposely leaving this information out to leave some mystery for the 2 corporately mandated sequels that they have planned before the film rights revert back to James Cameron in a few years. How else does the new timeline differ from the original one? Well, the Judgment Day that in the first timeline was going to happen in 1997 has now been pushed all the way back to 2017. We actually don't know how that happened, since the old inventor dude who blew himself up to stop the 1997 version, remember? Click boom, is actually still alive and well, and is actually his son in 2017 that's creating this new version of Skynet called Genisys to happen. I'm just glad we're keeping the apocalypse in the family, you know what I mean? Also, here's where it all gets a bit cute. Genisys is basically Siri, and it's all a bit too clever play on how much we care too much about our cell phones now and social identities and mixed emotions.
Gabe.
What? Oh, sorry. Something about the characters. Also having the characters build a time machine so that they can jump forward to 2017 seems more like a convenient way to get your cute new Sarah Connor to live in the modern day and not have to make all these new films with their weird 80s hair. So at the end of the day, the timeline is brand new and not at all one that we've seen before, and the way they got there is through some tricky Skynet scheming in the deeper past. If that doesn't make sense, remember, it's Terminator. Subscribe if you found this breakdown helpful, and if you want to see some more movie explaining or me a cappella movie soundtracks. Leave a comment what you think of this movie, by the way, a worthy successor. If you haven't seen it, we actually haven't spoiled too much, so go watch it. But definitely watch Terminator 1 and 2 first, because even though they're technically erased now, the movie is filled with tons of references to them that make the movie a lot better, and if you're too lazy to do that, watch our other video that shows every reference and Easter egg in the film. And how about that charming host, huh? Yeah, go watch it. I'm Gabe Hohreiter, and I really don't have any concern about the future and alternate timelines, because I'm close personal friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Do you think you could plug Gabe's channel?
Gabe's channel's success is not one of my mission's parameters.
Right, of course. Why would it be? Let me get some pants on.
Roll the videos of me.
They're rolling.
Good.
You're talking over them.
Oh.